today concludes our series on discipleship, but we are also just started on Wednesday night talking about discipleship and going through some of the important lessons more in depth. So I invite you to come and be a part of that this Wednesday as we get going with that. But we've talked about different aspects of discipleship, and today I want to close out the idea of discipleship with a very important aspect, and that is the willingness to share. And the idea and understanding that sharing grows us. It makes us grow in our understanding and our ability to make and become disciples. I think it's important to point out that sharing is not something that comes naturally to people. If you're a parent, you know that, because there's been at some point where you've had to get onto your kid because they wouldn't share. Because in their minds, it's my stuff, it belongs to me, and you don't need to touch it. And that becomes an attitude that's kind of born in us. So the idea of sharing, it takes work, and it takes development, and it takes a discipline and an understanding of you've got to be willing to let others share in what you have. And that's the whole idea of being a Christian. And that's to be willing to share what we have with other people. To say that what we have is not ours and ours alone, but we want you to have it as well. In Acts chapter 20, verse 35, the Apostle Paul is talking to the church, and he even says the very words of Jesus, that it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. I was talking about that with my Sunday school class this morning, and I thought about the fact, I don't know, maybe I'm just not a good gift getter. I don't know. But sometimes when somebody gives me something, sometimes I see it as more of an obligation than a privilege. I always feel like I need to give something back. I need to give them something back. But yet when I give a gift, that always makes me feel good. To be able to give somebody something that maybe they couldn't provide for themselves or couldn't own on their own, or just something that you were able to give somebody to let them feel and understand that you were thinking about them and that you're important to them. Jesus gives us that notion himself when he says it's more blessed to give than to receive. But I also want to look at the words of the Apostle Peter in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. Peter says this, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." And I think when you look at this and some of the things that he talks about, this royal priesthood and being the children of God and being called into light, it begs some questions that I think that we need to explore today. And the first one is, what would you do with unlimited resources? What would you do if you had unlimited resources? You hear some people say sometimes, what would you do if money was not an object, or if you didn't have to worry about the labor force, or if you didn't have to worry about this or worry about that? What would you do if you had unlimited resources? Well, if you were thinking in the right direction and doing the right things, the first thing you would do is begin to put those resources to work. You would make those things work for you, and you would accomplish something with them. I want to share something with you, and I want to get it right, so I have it saved on my phone here, so you'll have to forgive me for having my phone out in church. But it actually comes from noted horror writer Stephen King. Stephen King in 2001 was asked to do the commencement speech at Vassar. And it was the year following a very horrific car accident that he was in, where he was injured very, very severely. And he gets to this point in his commencement speech, and he shares this. He says, "What will you do?" Well, I'll tell you one thing you're not going to do, and that's take it with you. I'm worth, I don't know exactly how many millions of dollars, but I'm still third world compared to Bill Gates. But on the whole, I'm doing okay. And a couple years ago, I found out what "you can't take it with you" means. I found out while I was lying in the ditch at the side of a country road, covered with mud and blood, and with the tibia of my right leg poking out the side of my jeans like the branch of a tree down in a thunderstorm. It's Stephen King. He had to get gross. I had a MasterCard in my wallet. But when you're lying in the ditch with broken glass in your hair, no one accepts MasterCard. If you find yourself in the ER with a serious infarct, the doctor tells you, yeah, that lump that you felt in your breast is a tumor. You can't wave your Diners Club at it and make it go away. My life, as it happened, was saved. The man who saved it was a volunteer EMT named Paul Fillerbrown. He did the things that he needed to be done at the scene, and he drove me to the nearest hospital at 110 miles an hour. And when Paul Fillerbrown may have had an American Express card, I doubt very much it's a gold one. For God save us, the black one that offers double frequent flyer miles and a special deals at the Club Med. We all know that life is ephemeral. But on that particular day and in the months that followed, I got a painful but extremely valuable look at the simple backstage truths. We come in naked and broke. We may be dressed when we go out, but we're still just as broke. Warren Buffett, going out broke. Bill Gates, going out broke. Tom Hanks, going out broke. President Ferguson of Vassar, broke. Stephen King, broke. You guys, broke. Not a crying dime. And how long in between? How long have you got to be in the chips? I'm aware of the time passing by. They say in the end, it's the blink of an eye. That's how long. Just the blink of an eye. If you have unlimited resources, you put them to work. But you realize that what you have is a gift from God. And then it's easier to put what you have into work. This royal priesthood that we're a part of, it gives us unlimited resources. And we need to put it to work. But the other question is, what would you do with unlimited potential? Unlimited potential is a great thing. You know, we're called the children of God, and that makes us realize we have unlimited potential. This week is one of my favorite weeks of the year because it's the week that college football starts. I love football, and I love watching it, and I love, I was watching games of teams that I didn't even care about because I just love watching football. But football is an interesting thing because if you hear coaches and commentators talk, they always talk about potential and the potential of a team. And some teams realize their potential in the last few days, and some teams realized that their dreams were dashed on the first week of the season. And there's this interesting thing about college football, and it's the recruiting that goes along with it. And some people follow recruiting more closely than they actually follow the game. They know more about these teenagers' lives than some of those teenagers know about their own lives. And they put this star system on them. You know, this is a 2-star athlete, a 3-star. And if you're the cream of the crop, they give you 5 stars. But here's an interesting fact. I put in a Google search engine the other day. I put in there college football recruiting busts. In 0.36 seconds, it gave me over 3 billion websites to look at. 3 billion, with a B, websites that talked about college football recruiting bus. You know, there's always that 2-star athlete that ends up being a Pro Bowler in the NFL, and there's always that 5-star guy that ends up working a fast food job somewhere. And people wonder, you know, what is it that you can't really always measure potential. Because here's what happens, and I heard a coach say this recently. He said, sometimes I like recruiting those 2- and 3-star guys because they want to work to be a 4 or 5-star guy. And those 5-star guys think they're already there. What would you do with unlimited potential? You would develop it as much as possible. It all goes into the work you're willing to put in. There's an old acting coach, and her name was Uta Hagen. And she said, the moment that you think you've arrived, you're already slipping. Work at your craft. Continue to work and work and work and develop and grow and be what it is that God has called you to be. To be a child of God is a privilege, and to understand what that privilege means and what it can mean is an amazing, amazing thing. The other question I want you to ask is, what would you do if you had unlimited knowledge about life? You know, Peter says in this passage of Scripture, we're called into His wonderful light. And the thing about light is it makes things shown. It makes things known. What would you do if you were called into that light? What would you do with unlimited knowledge about life? I don't know if any of you have been in Mount Berry Square Mall lately. The couple of times I've been in there, judging from the crowd, you probably haven't. But if you go into the Mount Berry Square Mall, they've put all these huge pictures and murals on the wall of things from Rome and Floyd County. And in one of those pictures, right there near Belt, the entrance of Belt, is a picture of Helen Keller in sitting with, I think it's Martha Berry. And she was at Berry College, and you just think about this tremendously inspiring woman who went through so much and overcame so much. She said this, and it's interesting to think that she said it with her sensory deprivation that she had. She said, knowledge is love and light and vision. Knowledge is love and light and vision. You know, we have love and we have light and we have vision because of our relationship with Jesus Christ. I love, too, what Albert Einstein said about knowledge. He said, the more knowledge, the less the ego. The less the knowledge, the greater the ego. And I remember when I was in my undergrad, there were some of my professors that got really, really offended if you did not call them doctor. You know, if they had their PhD and you didn't call him Dr. So-and-so, it really bothered him. If you made the mistake of saying, hey, Mr. So-and-so, that's doctor. I actually had a couple correct me a few times, but it was funny. The ones that weren't doctors, if you called them Dr. So-and-so, they didn't correct you then. It was always weird that way. When I got to the University of Georgia working on my master's degree, I went in, some of the top people in the field were teaching at the school that I was in. And some of these guys had more degrees than a thermometer. I mean, it was amazing how much some of these people had. And I never had a professor at the University of Georgia that made me call them doctor, whatever. Every professor I had, they insisted that I call them by their first name. There wasn't that pretense there. That wasn't this, I'm too important that you have to call me this. It was, I'm here in this with you. I'm here to teach you, to help you to know what I know. If you had unlimited knowledge about life, if you had a clue about life, then your goal in life would be to share everything that you know with the people that you come in contact with. The answer in all is to share. The answer in discipleship is the willingness to share, because we understand that sharing grows us. Here's the reality. When we share, it draws us closer to the heart of God. John chapter 3, verse 16, Jesus says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, and whosoever believes in him will not perish but grant eternal life." When we share, it draws us closer to his heart. When we share that knowledge and people come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, it draws us closer to the heart of Jesus. Philippians chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. We talked about Philippians chapter 2 not too long ago, and the idea where it says that Jesus took on the very nature of a servant. He didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, so he became a servant, and he served other people. He shared everything that he had. He gave himself up. In Hebrews chapter 13, verses 15 and 16, I want to just share that with you. Hebrews 13, 15, and 16, it says, "Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that openly profess his name, and do not forget to do good and share with others. For with such sacrifices, God is pleased." Confess his name, share with others, be willing to sacrifice for him. When it comes to sharing, there are some key areas in your life that are helpful, and I think that are essential to understand. Key areas that will allow you to just take what God is saying here and really, really let it hold on to you. And I want you to turn with me to Luke. Both of these passages I'm going to read are found in Luke. The first one's in Luke, the 16th chapter, verses 10 through 13. "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling the worldly wealth who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Being faithful with the simple things leads to being faithful with the more complex things. And see, in our society today, a lot of people don't consider money to be a simple thing, but really and truly it is. It's a simple thing. You work, you get paid, you have this money, and you buy the stuff that you need. It's really a simple thing. And if you can't be trusted with that, how are you going to be trusted with the bigger things in this world? If you can't be trusted with the little things, it's going to be hard to be trusted with the big things. So when you become faithful in the little things, you lead faithfulness in the complexity of life. When I can start trusting you with the little stuff, God says, I can start trusting you with the big stuff. When I can start trusting you to take care of your responsibilities, then you can add bigger and greater responsibilities. Faithful in the simple leads to be faithful in the complex. And the other one is back over in Luke chapter 6, verse 38. To me, this is really a very interesting thing that Jesus says here. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. I don't know about you guys. I don't have an immense sweet tooth, but I love soft serve ice cream. I do. I admit it. I love soft serve ice cream. I love it especially if you can get the chocolate and vanilla swirled together. That's like the closest thing to perfection in this world, maybe, is chocolate and vanilla swirled ice cream. But have you ever gone to one of those places where they serve it and you watch the little teenager usually that's working the place, and they've taught them this trick to give you this big cup with not very much ice cream in it. You know what I'm talking about? If you ever watch the machine, once the ice cream starts going in there, it starts swirling. And if you move the cup just right, it'll swirl all around the cup, and you'll get to the top, and and it'll be hollow in the middle. Don't be cheating me out of my ice cream. But that's what some people try to do with their lives. They try to just swirl it around, and let's leave the middle empty. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. He's like, you take the cup, you fill it up, you shake it up to make sure it settles, and then you get it so close that you shave off the top so that you will know that the cup is completely full. It's got everything in it that it could possibly have, and I just give that to you. The measure that you give is the measure that you will receive. And so if you're taking and you're trying to swirl the cup, and you're trying to leave it hollow in the middle because you don't want to give everything to him, and you don't want it to be complete, you just want it to look good. You know, because, man, it looks good when they do that, don't you? They make the little top, and they can even make it swirl at the top, and you have this little curlicue, and you think you got this great thing, and you start licking that cone or whatever, or put your spoon in that cup, and it just, and you think, I've been cheated. I haven't been given everything that I want. Especially like you go to some place like you're in Florida, and they want like $8 for a 2-ounce cup of ice cream, you know, and you're like, if I'm paying $8, I want my cup slammed full. You want to receive what you give. But it's funny how we do the opposite with God. We want to give him very little, and we want to receive everything. We want all the blessing. We want all the good fortune. We want all the stuff. We want all the greatness of being in a relationship with God, and we want to give him this cup that's hollow in the middle. And guess what? When that's what we're willing to give to him, what are we going to give to each other? If we're trying to pass it off to God, and we're giving him as little as we possibly can, then what in the world are you going to give to somebody else, another human being? What are you going to say to them? What are you going to show them? What are you going to share with them? You're not willing to share with the one that gave it all to you. What are you going to share with somebody else? We got to start thinking about what we're willing to give to God. Man, sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get people just to show up on Sunday. And I remember when I was a kid, you know, I was all proud of myself, you know, because we used to get the little stickers for perfect attendance in Sunday school and all that stuff. Some people still do that stuff. It just cracks me up. But you get the little sticker, you know, you get you get the little stars in your name every week, and if you have a star every week, you get a sticker. You know, I remember you used to do it at VBS. You used to have a VBS like graduation. And you remember that? It was like a huge ceremony the last day of VBS. It was like, I'm surprised they didn't play Pomp and Circumstance, you know. And then you come down, you get this you get a diploma for VBS, and they put a gold sticker if you were there every day. Perfect attendance. You know, and we think, man, I need to get my sticker. I've been here every week this month. I asked for a 4-week commitment out of people that first Sunday. And I'm not going to ask you to show hands, but I want you to think about how many of you have been here the last 4 Sundays without missing one. You know, it's a matter of what do we think is important? What are we willing to give? Listen, my dad, we were talking about that because I was all proud of my sticker on the way home from church. And I was like, I got perfect attendance. I got a sticker and everything. And my dad said, showing up's the least you can do, son. Showing up's the least you can do. Now show up and do something. Show up and participate. Show up and be a part of it. Show up and give what you have. Share. Give and it will be given to you. But listen to this. According to what Jesus says here, give and it will be given to you by your standard of measure. What are you expecting to receive? Well, what you can expect to receive is proportional to what you're willing to give. What are you willing to give? Arthur Ashe was one of the great tennis players of our time. He was one of those guys that in the 70s was one of the ones that was really instrumental in breaking the color barrier in the game of tennis. He also was a pioneer in supporting AIDS research as he contracted the disease. The Courage Award given out by ESPN every year is called the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. He suffered a lot in his life. People put a lot of pressure on him in a lot of situations. Being one of the first famous black tennis players, there's a lot of pressure. Being a spokesperson for disease, which at the time was only being attributed to debauchery and just punishment from God for homosexual behavior, and people didn't really understand the disease or what it could be caused by or how it could be spread. And here was this guy, and he was courageous enough to stand up and say that he had this disease that he had received not by anything of his own doing. So Arthur Ashe was once asked, how do you handle all this? Here's what he said. Start where you are. Use what you have. And do what you can. See, I'm not asking, and I don't think God is even asking for some grandiose thing out of everybody here. He's not saying you have to be responsible for, thousands of people coming to know Jesus. Here's the thing. Start with one. Start with one. For some of us, that one is in our own home. That one is our next door neighbor. That one is that person we work with. That one is our mother or our father, our brother or our sister, our best friend or our boss. start with one. Share what you have. Share the gospel message of Jesus Christ. Be willing to grow. Be willing to give. And be willing to be a blessing. To be a blessing to somebody else. To not just do it for you, you know. Because here's the problem that we come to sometimes. We're like, oh, look at me, I'm sharing. I'm so great, you know. Sydney has done that a few times when we've tried to get her to share with her friends or her cousins or somebody. If she actually does share, she'll look at me and go, Daddy, I'm sharing. And I might tell her good, but I don't want to give her a ton of praise for that because the least she can do is share. We need to understand that we do the things that we do because it is good, because it is right, because it is what God modeled for us in His Son, Jesus Christ. Going back to that passage in Philippians, it said, He gave up everything to take on the very nature of a servant. He was the leader. One of my favorite shows to watch, and Kristen makes fun of me sometimes, but I love to watch the show Undercover Boss. Have you ever seen that show? The CEO or CFO or some bigwig in the company will go and disguise himself and go and be among his lower level employees most of the time. And they always come out of it with a greater appreciation for what people go through to keep the company going. And I remember one, it was a guy, he worked for Waste Management. And he went to this place where he literally had to crawl down in this cesspool and suck the junk off the bottom of the cesspool with this machine. It was disgusting. I'm so glad you can't smell what's on television because I was gagging just watching it, thinking about what this guy was in. And he realized that was this guy's job every day for 12 hours a day. And he went away with a greater appreciation. He went away with an understanding, and he was more willing to take a little bit different view. See, Jesus did that. He came and made himself, he was God and made himself a servant, but he didn't do it for himself because he already knew what we were going through. But he lived a life, and even Hebrews talks about he suffered as we suffered, he was tempted as we were tempted, and yet was without sin. He didn't do that for himself. He didn't do that for him to have a greater understanding. He did that so that we could understand what he has done for us. That we can understand that he knows what we're going through. He is a God that came to us. He was the God that wanted to be with us. And he loves us. And he wants us to share that love with everyone we come in contact with. And that, my friends, is discipleship.